The ILWU remembers the Battle of Ballantyne Pier.
ILWU!
My name is Charles Kaisla, and I am a stonemason.
It feels, really good. It feels like an honor, to be to help sort of commemorate some of Vancouver's history and help bring it to the forefront so people do know what happened within the city.
I got a call from Doug Will, who's a member of the Longshoremen's committee, and he approached me with the job, and we sort of just went from there. It took me over 30 hours to complete the job. It's a basalt stone, locally quarried in Squamish. Its weight is over 1,000 pounds, and it's over 7 square feet. So the stone will be purchased, layouts will be done. Upon approval, we'll then go ahead and start to lay the design work and the wording onto a stencil, which then gets temporarily placed on the stone. And then in my case, I hand cut all my letters. Once all the lettering's out, it goes in to be sandblasted, carved in, painted, and then at that point the stencil is removed and it's set, put on the trailer, and off it goes.
All right, now we're going to do a roll call. Local 519, 523, my home local 505, yeah! Local 508, 502, come on guys, let's hear from you. Retail, wholesale, where are you guys? How many people from the grain services union here tonight? 514, my local. 520, let's hear from you guys. Local 400, 517. 500, we here tonight. How about our future? The casuals. Come on, let's hear about the casuals here tonight. All right, the guys that started it all. Pensioners. How many pensioners here tonight? Come on.
All right, I like it.
Before 1934, dock work was considered employment of last resort. Working conditions were brutal. Maritime workers were treated as expendable. Employers had no concern for safe working conditions. Shifts were long, and workers who were injured or dropped from exhaustion were pushed aside.
He told me before I married him, if there's a strike, don't ever figure I'll cross the line, no matter how hungry you are. He was principled to the point where it drove you crazy. My husband was part of it in the sense that he went to a demonstration and he was hit by a policeman and was hospitalized, and that's my connection. By the time he was a young man, he was politically active. He was in demonstrations or whatever was happening at the time, and he certainly was not a longshoreman and was not connected with Longshore in any way, but he would have heard that this was going to go on, and he, as he told me, he was walking down to join them, and a policeman came up on a horse and hit him on the top of the head. So that was his total participation in the Battle of Ballantyne Pier.
The early 1900s saw a rapid growth in the labor movement. The industrial workers of the world began organizing workers on the West Coast around 1912. Their slogan, "An injury to one is an injury to all."
Well, on June 18th of 1935, the longshoremen in the port of Vancouver organized a demonstration, or a parade, that marched from their Union Hall, which was then at 633 East Hastings Street, down to the Ballantyne Pier. Depending on which article you read in the newspaper printed that day, there's anywhere from 1,500 people to 5,000 people. There was a lot. They marched down to the corner of Alexander and Heatley, and there were met by the police. They were met by Vancouver City Police, the RCMP, and at that time there was a provincial police force, and they were also met by something known as police specials, which are special police, not necessarily under the command of the Vancouver City Police. There was tear gas thrown against the crowd. They ran at them with batons on horses. They had 2 machine guns in boxcars on the boxcar siding, which were never used. A couple of the demonstrators, and I'll just call them demonstrators right now, but a couple of them were shot. 2 of them were shot by sawed-off shotguns by the police in the back. Both of them were shot in the back. There were over 100 of the so-called demonstrators hurt, injured, went to the hospital. There were, by the way, there were 41 police also injured that were also treated at the hospital and the Vancouver City Morgue. In the overall event, there was over 500 people arrested for all kinds of different charges, but that day I think there was only about 36. That particular battle on that given day was lost. The demonstration was broken. It was scattered all over. It got put back together sometime later. Other organizations got formed, other unions got formed, many other unions got formed. Ended up in the 1940s with a solid organization that has existed ever since.
There was little in the way of workers' compensation or health care, and those who reported injuries were blacklisted and denied work. In any given year, there were as many recorded accidents as there were longshoremen employed.
International Longshoremen's Association was broken by the Shipping Federation, and the Vancouver and District Waterfront Workers Association was formed. I understand that your dad started roughly around that same time?
He was on the waterfront in 23, and then as long as I can remember, he was a longshoreman till after the 35 strike, when he was blackballed.
Maritime workers began organizing in the mid to late 19th century. Dock workers founded the International Longshoremen's Association in 1892.
Well, blacklisting, you probably had a dossier on you. They're like this is down here. They collected information from other corporations. CPR used to send information on, sailors and miners and anybody else that they thought was militant. So if you were blacklisted for whatever reason, it could be anything. The way that you didn't like the way you parted your hair back then, chances are you weren't going to work here again, and maybe you're not going to work someplace else.
By the spring of 1935, longshoremen in virtually all ports in British Columbia were organized, and the employers provoked another major strike, locking out 50 longshoremen at Powell River.
1935, at the time of the Battle of Ballantyne, I was 9 years of age. So, of course, I wasn't involved in any way. But as I understand it, the dispute, it started in Powell River. The longshoremen up there wanted to be unionized, I believe it was, and the employers locked them out. And of course, any pulp that was loaded by non-union workers in Powell River was refused when the barges came to Vancouver. So the employers locked everybody out. And it was a long, vicious one. Times were so much different then. And people were blackballed and never worked again. When I was in office in 1966, I was still arguing with employers to get all that time credited for pensions and vacations, and was successful. We got an awful lot of people reinstated for their whole time, even though they were blackballed by the employers.
The union was determined, under the leadership of Ivan Emery, to take over the dispatching system, improve wage rates, and to change the method of distribution of surplus work.
When I started, Deep Sea was about 1957. And that was under the union contract out of the hall on Dunlevy Street. There was a lot of talk then about 35ers. People used to say, this guy's a 35er. I had never had a clue what that meant. And eventually found out it was a longshoreman who had went to work in 1935 after the strike was broke, or during the strike, wherever he went. And they didn't have much respect. I thought about those days with all those people walking through there, and I thought about how bad it must have been with no food for your family and no job, nothing to look forward to in those days. The war hadn't started yet, of course, and everybody was in pretty bad shape. And I thought how bad it must have been for some of those guys who believed actually in unions, who actually did go through the picket lines or work behind the lines in those days. And over the years, they had eventually become union members, and some of them become very, very good union members, and really believed in the union. And I thought to myself how bad it must have been for them to be called 35ers after what they went through. And we have to show some compassion in unions for people who have had to go through those things. And no one likes what we call a scab, and certainly not the ILWU.
The Shipping Federation had already established a new company union, the Canadian Waterfront Workers Association, and according to the union's daily strike bulletin of July 18th, they had announced the intention to break every maritime union in BC and replace them with company unions.
Don went to jail, I think it was 64, when the employers, Longshore employers, refused to allow them to have Victoria Day off as a holiday, and so all the Longshore local presidents went to jail together. I believe they were there for about 2 weeks. I don't know. It was in a Chilliwack work camp. Workplaces were very inflexible at those times. We had to fight for more vacation time. I mean, 1 minute late and the bosses would be looking at their watches. If you left 1 minute early, what are you standing around for? It's not 5 o'clock yet. I think young people today take things for granted at work. Like I mentioned before, that people have to remember that there were people way back that fought for our rights so we could have the working conditions that we have now.
In the words of Harry Bridges, the owners have only one objective: the destruction of labor unions. If we can't control the hiring hall, then the right of the longshoremen to organize is just a farce. The unions will be destroyed by discrimination and blacklisting.
Harry lived with that in the States right from the beginning of 34. And it never fazed him. He just kept going on and on and on. And that's the only thing you can do. Harry Bridges was the kind of a guy that would tell you to do something that you didn't want to do because it was against your principles. But he wasn't looking at that short-term situation. He was looking at the future. The ones that prevailed were the ones that really established the labor movement in Canada.
The Shipping Federation was adamantly opposed to these changes. It had determined that the time had come to break the union once more, just as it had in 1923. The Shipping Federation responded by declaring the October 1934 contract agreement at an end. The lockout and strike began on June 4th, 1935.
I think 34 and 35, what happened was similar. 1934, 1935, the waterfront was an open powder keg, and the spark of the union set the employers, set the politicians, set them all off. And what happened in 1934, I call them the Magnificent Seven, gave their lives in the struggle. It was in the midst of a Great Depression, hard economic times. They were wharf rats, the workers, and they were trying to get a union where they could put food on the table, take care of their families. The same thing happened in 1935. There's never a revolution or a struggle without casualties or bloodshed. Worldwide, we have so much economic strength. We are a threat to the employers, to the capitalists, to the politicians. Because when we speak, whether it's 34 or 35, our voices speak louder than anybody ever thought. Who would have ever known we would still be here 75 years later? Longshoremen have never, ever been afraid to fight. whether it's in the streets of Australia, Liverpool, Vancouver, San Francisco, we will fight you any and everywhere. We don't care about dying. We've shown that.
All right, listen, we all got these chants. Everybody got them in front of them? If you don't have it, stand beside somebody who does. All right? There's 3 chants here. We're going to practice them right now. Okay? Let's start with the first one. ILWU! ILWU! We remember, so should you! We remember, so should you! Support all unions, yours and mine! Support all unions, yours and mine! That was nice. That was very nice.
On June 18, 1935, Vancouver longshoremen marched to the Ballantyne Pier to protest employer actions.
It's very interesting and strikes some quite incredible parallels to some of the events that took place around the world on the waterfront during the Great Depression. In fact, there's some striking similarities to the battle for Ballantyne Pier and the conditions and atrocious behaviour of employers in Australia at that time, particularly on the Hungry Mile in Sydney, where questions of the allocation of work and the control of labour were very important, and Australian wharfies used to work under what was called the bull system. And what would happen is that unemployed workers would gather outside the gate of the waterfront, traipse up and down what was called the Hungry Mile, and wait for work to come up, and a foreman, or at that time an employee of the company, would stand up and pick and go, you, the biggest and the strongest, and so on, the people who would be maybe prepared to pay, the people who were prepared to get in and do the hard yards and not worry about, or worry about the company first. And then they would throw the chits into the crowd, and men would fight like dogs, and the indignity and the humiliation that workers had to go through to, in a time of great economic depression, to feed their family. It was an horrendous way that the waterfront worked, and I think that the response and the demonstrations at Ballantyne Pier are around similar issues. And you go back through ILWU history as well, and you look at San Francisco in the 30s, and it's the same things. And I think all around the world, wharf labour was treated in that abysmal way. And all around the world, I think waterside workers, dockers, longshoremen found that the only strength that they had was one another, and banding together, and their unity and their strength and capacity to stick together and fight the employers was what turned a lot of that situation around.
Somebody started throwing a couple of rocks, and someone hit someone with a blackjack, and then the police started using tear gas. That was the first time that an army had used tear gas against the Canadian civil population. It was the first time. First time tear gas was ever used.
I was working with the women in auxiliary there, and was helping in the restaurant. And that day there, Jerry McGeer, the mayor of Vancouver, I think it was, if I remember good. And I remember working in the cafeteria and there, serving sandwiches and food to the strikers. And a mounted policeman came into the restaurant, and we all scrambled, and I ran out the back crying, and I ran home. And it was very scary. We were all frightened.
We do live in a time and when unions are viewed as probably irrelevant, or dinosaurs, or something that may have been required 30 years ago, and now we're in a new era. But if you look at what's going on, it's a divide and conquer sort of situation. And as long as that situation exists, people will exploit it, particularly employers, so they will exploit weaknesses, or where they can divide you and split you over one issue and another. So it's the trade union movement that has brought people together, and it's the trade union movement that has focused your efforts and your energies so you don't get divided. You have a few people make a stand, a few people don't, and so you get split, smashed, broken, fired, reduced, whatever. So it's the solidarity of the union that makes the effort worthwhile. And again, we live in not bad times, and so I hope that the modern worker doesn't have to go through a 1930s type thing or a Ballantyne beating to realize that he needs a trade union to protect him.
Private Michael James O'Rourke, also known as Mickey, was a courageous soldier and an integral part of one of Canada's defining moments in labour history. His heroic efforts in World War I earned him the Victoria Cross. Carrying the Union Jack, Mickey led 1,000 striking waterfront workers and their supporters to Ballantyne Pier.
The employer's tactics of trying to turn men against women, active workers against pensioners, older workers against younger workers, they're the same today as they were 75 years ago, and it's something that we should always remember. The workforce becoming more and more militant and trying to reclaim their place in society, that the people weren't just for the scrap heap because there were few jobs around, and that people started to respect labor and demand respect for their labor. I think it's important for the labor movement and people working on the waterfront in particular to remember the Battle of Ballantyne at Ballantyne Pier, because it gives us a touchstone in Canadian labor history on how far that employers and governments are willing to go to suppress unions and to keep workers down. Get active in these social movements and get active in your union. The employers are most successful when there's a lot of apathy around, when people just don't care, they just show up for work and go home and think that politics has no part in it, but politics does play a major role in everything that we do. And if you're not politically active in your community and provincially and in the federal politics, then other people are making those decisions for you, and you end up fighting a rearguard action trying to reclaim what you lost. So people have to be proactive. We're doing some stuff now through the Columbia Institute and the Columbia Foundation to encourage people to become more active in their communities.
Tensions had been building up between the Vancouver and District Waterfront Workers Association and the Shipping Federation. It was only a matter of time before a showdown would take place.
The employer can't go around busting your head today. They can't do what they did at Ballantyne. They can't line you up and attack you with horses. So what happens is they get you into a courtroom and they beat you up in a courtroom. They beat you up with lawsuits or Canadian Industrial Relations Board, and they pick at you one by one, and they slowly try to pull you apart. If they find a wedge between one group and another group, they'll try to drive that wedge right into you and split you. So what you have to do is, if you feel that happening, is to regroup, talk to your brothers and sisters, sit down, talk with them, and say, okay, this is the angle they're coming from. Let's close up that hole. Let's plug it up. Even if we have to have somebody stand there with a finger in that hole, let's plug it. And then move on from there. It's really hard to get through to some people on those subjects because some people are afraid of change. Some of our people are afraid of change. The employer is definitely afraid of change. But once we break through as a union, the floodgates are open and we're going to all go rushing through there at once.
I love it down here. And I like the variety, that's work that we do, and it's never bored. Something different every day. I don't work down here that often. I usually head checking over at the container yard. I haven't been checking down here for a while. So it's new to me. I'm learning again. What I love most of my job down here is the variety. It's never the same. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to do until you go down to the hall and until you get dispatched.
Soon, the CWWA and the Vancouver Longshoremen's Association were lobbying for equalization of earnings and rotation dispatch.
So there's water, chucks, software, power and D, or power and pedo, volleyball, shorter, paint, pedo, and off.
They don't care about us. The only people that care about us are each other.
That's it. We have no friends in government. We have no friends in corporations. It's us against the world, and we have to understand that. The company hasn't gone for our jugular for a long time. I think they're coming now, and I hope that makes us solid.
Yeah, pretty much. You got till 3:15 to flip all your plates on the board, and everybody comes around. And after that, I flip the boards back and I see what's available to me. Basically, I take that and put together what the orders are.
It's going to be difficult to get the youth of today to become more solidarity within the union. I think people have to want to be involved. What Steve Nasby is doing with the Battle of Ballantyne is fantastic. I think everybody should go. I think when we have our pensioners picnic in Cultus Lake, everybody should go. When we have union meetings, everybody needs to attend. And it's hard to, you can't tell somebody to do something. At the end of the day, they have to want to. And how do we get people to want to be involved in the union? Honestly, I don't know. I wanted to be involved because I grew up with it. I think it's the greatest thing. I think a union is a very noble creature. It's amazing. It's an amazing democracy that we have unionized labor. I don't know what's happening in our society that it's almost like the corporations have done a much better job than the unions to convert youth. Everybody wants to be the rock star and drive the Cadillac and be the pimp daddy. My dad was more than happy to work his ass off and come home for a day and have dinner with his family, and that was the goal. The goal wasn't to be rich and famous. The goal is to come home with your family and be proud of what you did for the day.
On December 9th, realizing that the strike was a losing battle, the union officially called off the strike. It appeared that the Shipping Federation had won a complete victory, but change, though stalled, could not be halted.
That is the stuff, Bill, reminds me when I was a kid back home. It's those are the people, the Ballantyne, what we have today, their sacrifice has given us whatever we have today. If they haven't done that, all that stuff, they did not stand for the rights, human rights and the workman's rights, we would not, workman and work movement, we would not have all this today. And we should learn from them. There is time. You may not be able to get advantage or you may not be gaining in that moment, but you are leaving something more gains for the future, coming generations, and that's what those people did for us. How can you forget those people?
The Maritime Union of Australia are here today representing the workers of Vancouver, representing the ILWU members of Vancouver, commemorating 75 years of struggle on the Battle of Ballantyne Pier. The MUA is rock solid behind these comrades. We always have been and we always will. They are our brothers in struggle. This is the struggle that belongs to the Maritime Union of Australia as much as it does to the ILWU.
In 1941, the CWWA and the VLA amalgamated to present a unified body to the employer.
Through the history and education that the ILWU Canada is putting on courses, it's involving us more, and the younger members like myself are beginning to learn this stuff because of our education, which is important for us all to realize that the more we educate our younger members, the more solid we can get to. Going forward from today, I believe it's up to us younger guys that are sort of taking over from the older guard to continue to educate our members and our casuals as to what the labor movement is, what's involved in it, and putting together our strengths and continue to build the bridge for the ones that are coming behind us. We need to definitely remember all these little battles along the way. What's become of them? Why these presidents went to jail, and we ended up getting a paid holiday out of it. These little battles like this so as younger casuals stuff walk into this workforce, they don't just think there it is. They actually realize what battles took place to have this become. The company has never given us anything. We have fought and struggled for everything that comes along. Our presidents, our past presidents, our future presidents have to continue to fight and have our rights taken care of, and our wages and the living that we all prosper from.
In 1943, The BC Council of Longshoremen brought together 6 independent unions, including the CWWA, the Vancouver Longshoremen's Association, the North Vancouver Longshoremen's Association, and the ILWU Vancouver, the ILWU New Westminster, and the International Longshoremen's Association Vancouver.
I remember my first day when I got hired as a longshoreman. I was over at Vanterm on our coffee break. We were humping sacks, and I was just dazed at all the machinery, and I was just looking at the end of the dock, and I seen these big orange cranes, and the foreman comes up to me and he goes, Reno, what are you doing? I go, I'm going to drive one of those things. And the foreman goes, you'll be an old man by the time you drive those things. I go, I bet you not. And 12 years later, here I was driving, and I went up to him. I go, I thought I'd be an old man. And I was one of the youngest crane drivers to operate these. So that was pretty cool, I thought. I love this job. I miss being a crane operator, but I can always go back once I get out of office. It's like a big toy. That's right.
In March 1944, Vancouver becomes chartered ILWU Local 501, and in July 1944, New Westminster becomes chartered ILWU Local 502, establishing ILWU jurisdiction in BC.
Well, every day I go to work, I do feel the unity and the solidarity. I believe everyone has our union's best interest at heart when they go to work, and you know, it's a good thing because people fought so hard for our rights, and hopefully we'll be able to continue and make them proud. I've always had an interest in the job, curious about it, and I feel I was comfortable with it because I was around other union people, grew up in a union family. I think I have the same work opportunity as the rest of my brothers and sisters on the waterfront. The experience down on the waterfront has been a good one. I enjoy working down there, and I'm glad to work with people who have the same interest in supporting their families. And from experience, I think everyone's treated fairly, and everybody is everyone's equal down there.
In 1945, the British Columbia Council of Longshoremen became the BC District Council and included Vancouver, Port Alberni, Prince Rupert, and New Westminster. You know, when I got up on the building there and rallied the troops, and we went through the chants, I said to people, I got goosebumps, and I did. It just when everybody chanted ILWU, we remember, so should you.
The Battle of Ballantyne is a big historical event. I think it opens the door for basically people's civil rights. And I think that the newer generation has to know that because they've never had to face those kind of ordeals.
1935! 1935!
The Battle of Ballantyne march that we just had recently was, you could say, an emotional experience for me. I saw all manners of people come together. I was going to say all manners of men, that's an old quotation, but all manners of people, like men, women, children, came out to respect the people that went through a struggle 75 years ago on the waterfront here.
The Battle of Ballantyne was a setback from which the Vancouver and District Longshoremen resiliently managed to build a militant representative union out of a lost strike.
It means more to me than ever to give back to the union because it's given me a lot. Those fellas that walked in 35 weren't just walking for themselves or their jobs, but they had foresight and vision for the future, and they were fighting for their families, their kids' rights to work. And it's important for us to realize that that battle that happened then, I mean, it still goes on today. We still fight the employer. You know, we don't do it with such physical violence, but now most of it's in the courts.
A lot of people today will argue that everything's changed. The people have changed, the employers have changed, things are harder, things are tougher, but that's not so.
Welcome everybody, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends of the ILWU.
Harry Bridges said that our first charter ILWU president said that longshoremen are interested in pork chops, not politics. At the time, in the 30s, there was a labor leader named Paddy Morris of the ILA, International Longshoremen's Association, that said longshoremen, communism, radicalism, anarchy, these are all employers' terms.
Shows that we respect our history, we respect our working people. It's fantastic to see this on a beautiful summer day celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Ballantyne.
Study the history of the union and the whole trade union, because you can see it in there that when they were solid and together, they won.
The ILWU has been in the forefront of lobbying President Obama and lobbying the governments down in various places in South America to knock off the violence against working people.
We should remember Ballantyne because we should always remember that the employers in 1935 are the same employers that are there today. There might be taller or shorter or wider or fatter or skinnier, but they're the same people. They think the same, they're trained the same, and they're going to try to take benefits from us. They're going to want us to work cheap. They're going to want to cut our pensions, our welfare. They're going to want to do all of that. No, I don't say they all want to do that, but there's enough of them to make it very miserable for us.
But let me tell you that the struggles that the workers made, and the struggle at the Ballantyne Pier to retake their jobs, to reclaim their jobs being taken away by scabs, has had a tremendous effect on the history of our movement. Those 3.2 million workers I have the pleasure of representing surely got a lot of their benefits because of the sacrifice and the struggles started at the Ballantyne Pier.
What I liked about the union was that there was an opportunity for people, if they wanted to progress and develop. If they had the qualifications and seniority, they could apply for jobs. Many places where I worked before, you got a job and you stayed in that same job all the time, whereas here you could improve yourself and get better pay.
I just want to leave you with a few words my father gave to me. My father was a merchant seaman and retired longshoreman. He's passed and moved on, and he always told me, take care of your union, and your union will take care of you.
It's a complicated thing sometimes to try to figure out where the easy road is, and there isn't an easy road. To try to take on the actions of the employers.
Lefty wasn't a longshoreman. He was a railway worker, but he was an astute laborist, and he supported the longshoremen, and he supported the issue that they were fighting for. And he stayed with that rally in 1935, had 12 stitches in his head, and always spoke about it to his wife, Margaret. So Margaret, would you like to come up, please?
The ILWU, we have been that beacon of light for this global labor movement throughout the world. Those today that were marching on the pavement represent generations of longshore men and women that came before them. We have a very, very proud heritage. That's what you saw marching through the streets. Militant. We make no apology. We speak truth to power.
Let's honor those that came before us. Let's tell those rat bastards that they're not going to take our hiring halt. They're not going to take our working conditions. They're not going to take us down. Because we will not stand for it here or anywhere else around the world. United we stand, divided we fall, and we are united. And as the international president of the ILWU, it gives me great honor. I will support you, I will stand beside you, and I will fight with you, because they are not going to take us down. Thank you very much.
I don't think young people need to be told what to do. I think we need to listen to young people and understand what young people want. But at the same time, we have to educate and demonstrate that the history of our unions was one through struggle.
There were a lot of other people besides Longshore workers that day who were there because it was the labor movement fighting with you. And we understood back in 1935 that if we didn't stick together, that we were going to beg. And so the people they beat up that day and shot that day just weren't Longshore. They were railway workers and loggers and fishermen and shore workers and other waterfront workers too, and other unions as well. Why? Because we understood if they could bring scabs in and break your strike, they were breaking ours. Today, what's the lesson? The same thing. If we don't stick together, we can't get what we need. When Tommy said that when you're sitting down and your bargaining team is sitting down at the bargaining table today, and the same employers that were fighting the dispatch system in 1935 want to take it away from you today, then the lesson we have is that they haven't changed, but neither have we. The Federation of Labor, working people will be with you because you're not turning back the clock on Longshoremen or anybody else in this province.
I hope that the modern people don't have to go through something like that, that through education and talking to old guys like me and other things, that we develop a solidarity that fits the times, fits the circumstances, and fits the needs of the people of the day, because they are different. We do have a different, a different economy, we have a different outlook, and we have a different union.
It's very important that everybody who's in the labor movement gets involved, men, women, everybody from all sectors of society, to make sure that you keep your union strong, make sure your union doesn't get taken over by people that you don't want there. And one thing we're very proud of in the ILWU is we're a rank and file union, which means we're driven by the membership, although we may supply ideas, and many of the ideas for things that the union has gained over the years have come from the rank and file, and the brains of the organization, if you will, is vested in the rank and file. It's not all driven from the top.
And this march, whether it was to commemorate them or just as a celebration of their efforts, it was quite emotional, and just thinking of those people and what they went through at the time and what we have today, the benefits we have today because of their struggles, and what we have achieved since then.
I think we owe them a special vote of thanks for doing that.
My vision is to be ahead of the future, not part of it. Get involved and be strong. We stand as one. An injury to one's an injury to all.
Whether you're man or woman, what race you are, or what family background you have, we all have the same opportunities. And I'm worried that it's not going to be there for their children.
It's always been in my family. Once I was registered, things were slow. I took off for a little bit and have come back. And since I did, it's probably been one of the greatest decisions I ever made in my life, getting back involved and getting involved in the office.
There is unity when I go to work every day. I feel it every day, and I feel there's a show of solidarity. And I believe that with that, we can strive towards fighting for everything that the founders of this union fought so hard for.
I think in a way, what do? We just got to be more solid and more communication. In this communication age, those lines of demarcation have got to go in the way that we're not rivals, we're in it together. So I just think they're slowly going away. I see them as my brothers.
My experience is you can write a book every day on the waterfront. Like, there's always something new, and as you go through, you learn every day something new. It's not like it's same thing over and over. You are learning as you're going. It's really, really neat.
When we marched, the world knew that we were alive and that we were stirring. We'd been silent for a long time, but we won't stand silent anymore. We won't stand by and watch our brothers and sisters lose their livelihoods.
That camaraderie, working with each other, and I saw a lot of that camaraderie in that march. I felt that again. I haven't felt it for a while, but I felt it again. And that warm shiver I got when I was up on the building, I got that same shiver the night I was sworn into the ILWU. It was one of the proudest days of my life, the day I said I'm a union man with the ILWU. In the words of Harry Bridges, what saved us was our faith in each other, standing together despite what the employers did to intimidate and divide us, and discredit our leadership. We showed the world that united working people could stand up against guns and tear gas, against the press and the courts, against whatever they threw at us. We could do it again.
Once we really understand that good union feeling, get that good solid feeling of solidarity, when the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. What force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they never toiled to earn, yet without our brain and muscle not a single wheel could turn. We can break their haughty power, gain a freedom when we learn that the union makes okay. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoard of gold, greater than the might of armies magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union sounds good. Solidarity